All right, so keep all of that data in your head because I'm going to use almost exactly the same data set. In addition to the 160 million odd resumes, we also have about 55 million different skills data points. So I'm going to use that to get at what is the value of these artificial intelligence skills to the firms that are employing them. So I think many of us are familiar with this Hal quote that, I'm paraphrasing here, you want to be an expensive complement to something that's getting rapidly cheaper. Data is getting much cheaper. Analysis is something that you want to be involved with. Well, that advice works pretty well for firms too, and especially if you can make that complement much cheaper deliberately, you might end up being able to appropriate a lot of rent. So Google did this, right? With the advent of TensorFlow, which is a machine learning platform that makes it relatively easy to do deep learning. This is Jeff Dean. He's one of 2 engineers at Google whose skills go to 11. He, with the Google Brain team, built a system that, at the time that they sort of surprisingly open sourced it, they were about 8 years ahead of the rest of the market in terms of what it could do. So effectively, they made it so that anyone could do deep learning if they were basically a competent software engineer instead of taking a really difficult set of things and having to implement them across multiple platforms. And importantly, TensorFlow affects talent. So I was lucky, Jeff Dean, as I was starting to write this paper, came to campus and he copped to this, where he said, currently the solution is ML expertise plus data plus computation is equal to the solution. He's actually talking about auto ML here, so another step. And they want to turn it into just data and computation. Why is that? Well, Google's got a lot of assets that do data and computation. If they can make the ML expertise cheap, then they make money. This creates a spillover for everybody else who's not selling computation in the sense that they can now get that talent if they're using AI much more cheaply. So my research question here is who's going to benefit from these investments in technological talent? Obviously, if you're a college student, you learn how to do TensorFlow, you're going to add some money to your expected future salary. But to what extent are employers going to be able to appropriate some of the rents from those investments? If we think that there's some bargaining going on between the firm and the employee, then you can think of this bargaining as kind of an intangible asset that the firm is going to pick up. Also, there's a mechanism for monopsony power here that's sort of under-discussed, which is that the firm gets to decide what you do. Herb Simon mentioned some of these in some older papers where you can say, I'm going to have you work on firm-specific stuff, even if the tools you're using to build that firm-specific stuff are fairly general and available in the market. So when TensorFlow comes out, it's an expected future shock to productivity and wages of AI workers. Some of these people are making $2 million a year, and now you can hire, they're still expensive, you can hire an AI engineer for $250,000, depending on where you are. So I'm going to use this detailed LinkedIn panel. We've got tons of resume data. Sunny described some of that, some of the benefits and costs of working with that data. And use this TensorFlow launch as a natural experiment. And just to kind of preview the results, for all the firms that use AI, adjusting for a bunch of other factors, there's about a 4 to 7% boost in their market cap in the quarter that TensorFlow comes out. Sort of a level shift, and then after that, there's no difference that I can detect between the AI using firms and the non-AI using firms. So the middle quintile firms, kind of your medium users of AI, get the biggest boost, and then try a few robustness checks to see if that holds up. So I have another set of results around general engineering value. Is there free money? Could you hire another engineer and increase your market cap? I don't find evidence of that on the margin, but if you do this hedonic regression, your value per engineer is about $850K. So if I were pricing a company and I only knew how many engineers they had, this might be useful. Okay, so there's a lot of work linking technological labor and productivity and market value, especially people in this room have done a lot of that foundational work. Generally has to do with co-invention, firm-specific assets, how the firm is doing things that its competitors can't, so there are rents that are a little bit durable. If we think that there are other things that workers care about besides just how much they're getting paid, do scientists pay to be scientists? Is there monopsony power because you don't want to move? Are you playing with special tools that only your employer cares about and no one else? These things are relatively important, and we're trying to understand more broadly how the frontier is running away from the median in terms of productivity and profitability. So Diego did a great rundown of investment theory. I'll just point out that when you're valuing a firm, often there's this assumption that average product equals marginal product equals wages. So the labor part doesn't enter. That's probably not true. So I'm going to relax that. I don't know if this is an intangible asset coming from the tech or if it's coming from this marginal difference between what you pay workers and what you get from them. To some extent, think of that all as like an intangible asset. So TensorFlow increases the supply of expected future AI workers, and then firms pick up this little triangle at the end. OK, so I'll skip over this because we kind of talked about it. Here's some evidence that TensorFlow is a big surprise. There's Google search data. It spikes immediately once the tool gets open sourced. This is how much code you need to train at the time, state-of-the-art image classifier for handwriting digits. This is one small piece of one optimizer that you would have to write in the previous state-of-the-art before that comes out. But what's really nice about TensorFlow is the stuff that you need to build across platforms and write the same code once and have it run everywhere is automated by Google. So CPUs, GPUs, Android, iOS, all of that is canned. You don't see that. You write the same code and it goes everywhere. But you can get into the details if you want. Immediately, once it comes out, it spikes. It becomes more popular than even scikit-learn, which was hugely popular as a machine learning platform. Google also let their engineers work on it. So can we track that in talent? Yeah, it shows up on LinkedIn. These are deep learning skills additions by month. That red line is where TensorFlow gets launched. It starts to go exponential. Now, how do I know what's an AI skill more broadly besides TensorFlow? I'm not really looking at TensorFlow. Well, I'm going to use machine learning to do that. So by looking at all the skills data that comes into LinkedIn, where people have common skills, we can build these clusters. There's a good amount of artificial intelligence there, where I have to tag what's an AI skill and watch it as it goes through here. But that's behind the curtain. We don't have to talk about that. So some groupings we got, they're pretty reasonable. I mean, machine learning, those are like fairly highly curated, but for your R versus Stata argument, you've got data science in R and Stata in economics, so take that as you will. Robotics, there's some interesting stuff there too. Sunny showed you this. It's sort of, there's a bunch of information, but also, surprisingly, and Avi and Florento pointed this out, there's not as much in healthcare right now, but it seems like a big place to go. Retail, technical services, all picking that up. So there's a prediction question here, like, is AI priced at all? These are estimates for excess market value in addition to total assets, revenues, value added. Yeah, we see this predictive value for market value, even including firm fixed effects. But once you include firm fixed effects, the revenue and value added side starts to go away for AI. So there's something about the firm that's not changing that predicts AI really well, but it's hard to say that there's this productivity gain that's already happened on the margin. We've got some arguments about the productivity J-curve and why that might be going on. But there is a repricing in AI-related companies in 2016 when this comes out. So when TensorFlow launches, an order of magnitude increase in your AI skills will lead to about a $3.3 billion increase in your market value. So here's what that looks like. You got two standard deviations on either side of this over time. It's kind of interacting with all the time dummies. There's this pop-up in the quarter following TensorFlow's launch. And maybe I got unlucky here, though. This is pretty noisy. That just happened to be the only statistically significant quarter. So we can break that up by these other quintiles, and you see this pop up for the low and medium users of AI. That's your red and blue jumps. But the green ones, those are kind of high-flying firms. They've been there doing well the entire time. So there's a bit of a pre-trend there. You can adjust for that. The estimates are still pretty large, around $1 billion. We can look at other things as a robustness check. Here's data science. There's no pop-up, but it's positive. You can make and lose a lot of friends with these graphs. Here's linear regression, not statistically significant. Here's management, negative point estimates. Here's advertising, positive and significant. You've got something to advertise, it's probably going to work. So I do some robustness checks with synthetic differences and differences. AI and deep learning are the only statistically significant ones following this pop. The estimates actually go up. This is sort of treating, do you have AI as a treatment, and it's a dummy variable. So that might be why some of that's going on. So in summary, you think this supply shock has important implications for firm productivity when you're using AI. It's important to keep in mind that there's a difference between the investment market and the labor market. the labor market increase can affect the investment market Q. So it's both supply and demand at the same time. But it's the Q value of the firms going up as a response for their inputs getting cheaper. So who earns these returns? The firm does share in that. And certainly, if you're a software engineer, I'd encourage you to learn TensorFlow, but you're not necessarily going to earn $2 million now. Broadly, I'll say, though, that these technological shocks can help us understand these employer-employee dynamics, and I think they're pretty useful. So if you'd like to talk more about that, I appreciate your comments and concerns. Thanks a lot to the organizers. Excited to be here.